welcome back to Opal and Mint. I am Ashley. The video I originally had scheduled for today, I filmed a week ago and was completely out of focus when I went to edit it. So here I am. And I've decided there's a video I've been wanting to do. And so I figured today was the day. It's just meant to be. So I'm going to be talking about things you need to master or practice at least in order to paint florals. Now, this could be in order to paint anything really, but I think that especially if you're following along with our watercolor blooms or you followed along with our Flower Everyday series, if you're just painting flowers in general, these are brush strokes and techniques that you need to master to make that easier. So I try to break down the florals to simple steps and things that you can follow easily. But if you haven't figured out how to do the tipped belly tip stroke or light washes, there's some things that will make watching those videos and following tutorials in general a lot easier. So I figured I'd break those down, super beginner, super basic. But even if you're not beginner, it's great practice. I still do this stuff all the time just to continually improve and practice my brush strokes. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to work on things you need to master in order to paint watercolor florals. So let's go ahead, turn the camera around, and we're going to start painting, practicing. And I promise you it's not that complicated. It just takes a little bit of practice. So let's go ahead and get to it. All right, so for when you're practicing brush strokes and techniques, a lot of times you don't really need to use expensive paper. Once you get a little bit more familiar with these brush strokes and things, it's good to practice on your expensive paper. But when we're just learning and we're just figuring out these strokes, using an inexpensive paper is just fine. This is one I got on Amazon. This was in my 100% cotton paper testing video. I have lots of paper left over from that, so I'm just going through all of it. But this one's not bad. So again, this is 100% cotton and it is an A4 size. I like to use larger papers. It kind of came off the thing. But I like to use larger papers when I'm practicing brush strokes and things. That way I don't run out of room and I can just do a whole bunch. Okay, I am going to be using my Daniel Smith palette today. This is my go-to professional brand. If you've been around, you know I love handmade paints too, and I love trying all different brands, but this is my go-to. I know what these are going to do, and I highly suggest if you're learning, try sticking to one paint for a while. Get used to the way those colors work, the way that the washes work, and then kind of branch out. You don't need to get all of the paints in the world, especially when you're just starting out. Highly recommend just starting with one set of paints and getting familiar with painting first. Okay, so that's, I guess the first tip is get familiar with your paints. So let me see here. Let me adjust the light. All right, so I'm gonna be using this is a natural hair brush, and I am not saying that you need a natural hair brush. Most of the time I'm not using a natural hair brush, but I do actually enjoy them. And this one is really nice. This is not an inexpensive brush. If you just get a couple of really good brushes and stick to them, I think it could be worth it. This is the Creative Mark Rhapsody Round Kolinsky Sable. This is the size 6. I have a set of these. I have a 2, a 4, a 6, and something else. Starting with a round brush is a great way to start your brush stroke practices. So any kind of round brush that comes to a nice point, if it doesn't have a good point, you are going to get a little bit frustrated. And I will probably in this video show you a couple of different ones that I like. And then there's also different flexibilities, and getting to know what your brush is capable of and what it does is another thing that will help you. And also discovering if you like a snappier brush or a floppier brush. There are artists, one that comes to mind is Emma Lefebvre. She loves a snappy brush that just is stiffer and bounces back. The stiffer brushes are, in my opinion, more typically used in like acrylic painting and things. So I like to use those for acrylics, but they're good for watercolors as well, depending on what you prefer. Let's see, there's another, I want to talk about brushes just for a second, okay? So aside from the natural hair that I love, I really enjoy the silver black velvet. This is the size 8. I use this one a lot. It does, after repeated use, start to not lose its shape. It's fraying a little bit, but as soon as you put it in water, it goes back to a fine point. So it looks a little ragged when it's dry, but it does go back to a fine point. I've used this one a lot. This is a Princeton Neptune round size 6. I have a hard time linking this exact size on Amazon. It seems to be out a lot. So any of the Princeton Neptune brushes are fantastic. I really, really enjoy those. But yeah, getting to know, here's another snap brush, and they bounce back. They're a little bit stiffer, maybe easier to control for beginners, but it really just depends on what you personally like. So I'm gonna start with the natural hair, and we're gonna start with some brush strokes. Okay, all right, so for brush strokes, it doesn't really matter what color we're gonna use. This is a great time to use up colors that are on your palette. So there's a whole bunch of blue right here. So I'm just gonna use the color that I have right here. One practice that you need to get used to doing every time you go in and get color, if I do this and then just lift up my brush, do you see the shape of the brush? See how it's squished flat? That's not the effect that I'm looking for unless I'm doing dry brushing. So know that you can do this for dry brushing, but if I am wanting a nice fine tip, I swirl it around and then I rotate my brush and pull. So you're just gonna rotate it and pull until you get that nice, fine, pointed tip, okay? So now that we have that nice, fine point on our brush, let's go in with some brush strokes. So we're gonna start with doing the lightest brush stroke possible. So we're gonna use just the very tip of your brush, and this will show you the capability of each brush as well. So if your brush does not have a super fine tip, you're not gonna be able to get the really, really fine marks. But all right, so to get the finest point possible, you're not gonna hold your brush out to the side like this. You're gonna hold it vertically. And this is where I run into problems filming, because sometimes I will hit my camera with my brush. But this is how you can get a nice thin line. So if you're holding it this way, it's a little bit harder. I mean, I can do it. It works. But if I'm holding it vertically like this, you keep your wrist straight if you're gonna do just a straight line. So don't use your wrist, hold your wrist straight and move your entire arm, okay? So we're going to hold it vertically and you're just gonna go across the paper. And do not worry about making them perfectly perfect. This is practice. You're gonna have some brush strokes that look good, you're gonna have some that look bad. This is all about getting that muscle memory and getting familiar with the way your brush works. You know what? This specific brush actually is fine holding it at an angle. And again, each brush will have a different feel. Let's go up and down. So up and down, I like to do this with my fingers. I go like this with my hands. So not my wrist, but I go up and down with my fingers like this. So I will go like this for vertical, but just try to practice some thinner brush strokes across your paper. And then I'm gonna go diagonal. So I am, again, holding it kind of vertically and I'm keeping my wrist stiff here. And we're just gonna do some brush strokes, okay? These are actually also good sketching exercises as well, but getting familiar with the way your brush feels and how you move it in different directions. Okay, so I'm gonna do the same thing but with a different brush. I'm gonna see how it feels different. So I'm gonna take actually the Princeton Snap. This one doesn't look like it has near as fine of a tip, so let's see what it does and what we can get out of this brush. All right, so I'm taking my Princeton Snap round size 10. So this is a slightly larger brush as well, but I'm gonna do the same thing I'm going to twist my brush, and you can see it is not as fine of a point, but let's see what we can get out of this brush. All right, so I'm just going to go vertically. So you can get really fine strokes even from a slightly thicker brush if you just put the lightest pressure. Let's do some. It's harder, but you can get fine strokes out of it. And obviously the smaller your brush is, the smaller your brush strokes get, or the finer the tip. Let's look at this Princeton Neptune. So again, I'm twirling my brush as I pick it up. And just gonna do some little brush strokes. So do them in all different directions, kind of play around, get familiar with how your brush does, and build up that muscle memory in your hand, okay? All right, I'm gonna go back to the Creative Mark brush. Okay, so once we have gotten familiar with using the very tip of our brush, we're gonna do the opposite now. We're gonna use the belly of the brush. If you're not familiar with the anatomy of a brush, we have the tip of the brush, and then the widest part, like this part here, is the belly of the brush. So we have the tip and the belly, okay? So to push through the belly of the brush, all we're doing is putting more pressure on the paper. So we're on the tip of the brush here, and then this is the belly of the brush, pushing it flat. Okay? This is not a pretty color. Let's get a little bit more red in there. Okay, so now that you've practiced brush strokes with the tip of your brush, let's practice brush strokes with the belly. So all you're gonna do is, I'm kind of holding mine at a 45-degree angle for this brush stroke, but you can hold it more vertical if you want, but I like 45, and you just push that belly of the brush. Okay, so you're just pushing as wide of a brush stroke that the brush will do. Okay, this one's pretty easy, pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. You don't have to balance too much to get, you know, that thin line. It's easier to get the thicker. So that one typically don't need a whole ton of practice on. So what you do next is you go from tip to belly, belly to tip, tip to belly, going back and forth using different pressure and getting familiar with using different pressures. So this is where these, I'm gonna call them compound strokes, will really improve your florals, okay? So we've got our tip down, we've got our belly down. So we're gonna work on starting with the tip, and these strokes, these more compound strokes, will be used through everything. And getting these down is what's gonna give you the most benefit in these practices. So we're gonna start with the tip, and I really, when I'm doing these, I'm not completely vertical, I'm almost, and I like to start with the tip, go for a while, push the belly for a while, and then graduate back to the tip and do that a few times. Again, we're getting our paint. We're gonna twirl it to a tip, and then we're gonna come over here. So we're gonna start at the tip, push through that belly, and then graduate. The slower you graduate back to the tip, you'll see how it tapers a lot slower, obviously. And so doing this, you'll see how you can do more abrupt ones or more elongated ones. I feel like I elongated my words, elongated. The sun is coming and going behind clouds, so I'm sorry about the light changing. We are changing up our setup soon, and we're going to be playing with some artificial light. So, all right, so let's just put here tip, belly, and tip. So this is the main stroke that we will do throughout all of the florals and leaves and all of those things. So practice your tip, belly, and tip. Stopping it abruptly, stopping it slowly. And then once you get that one stroke, the tip, belly, tip, you're gonna go all the way across your page and you're gonna go tip, belly, tip, belly, tip, belly, and try to make it as smooth as possible. So tip, belly, tip. And it takes quite a bit to master this perfectly. And as you see, I am not even the smoothest at it. It's a continual practice, and some days I have better control than others. So I want to do tip, belly, tip, belly. I want to like whoop, do like this waving motion. And these are practices that will greatly increase. And I'm going to show you how in practice, in actuality, these strokes go into doing the florals and leaves. If this is all stuff that you already know, I'm sorry. And I know that there are a lot of beginners on here. And so I want to make sure I'm showing the fundamentals and the basics as well. So anyways, go through, do different lengths, and I'm going to do tip, push, push, gradual, 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 and try to do different variations of the tip, belly, tip stroke. Okay? So this is the basic. These are the basics. This is the fundamental brush strokes you need to know. And then from there, you can do stuff like tip, belly, tip on a curve. So say we're doing a petal of a rose, okay? So it's the same exact thing, but you're just curving your brush with it. So first of all, let's just do curved lines. So we've done everything straight so far. But let's take, a lot of people call them C curves, but they're just a curved line, okay? Do that with just the tip of your brush. We'll then go in and do tip, belly, tip on a curve. So once you get familiar with this, you can then start with the tip, push that belly out, and then end with a tip, okay? Let me get a different color so we can see this better. I'm just gonna paint on top. Okay, so again, every time I'm going into my paint, I'm rotating my brush to get that fine point. So I did one this way, I'm gonna do one curving out this way now. Tip, push through that belly, and then tip, okay? Same stroke, but just adding a curve with it. So get familiar going around in all directions, because when you're doing the rose, you want to do all the directions of the rose. I mean, you can rotate your paper if you're unfamiliar, if you're not comfortable, but getting more comfortable with doing curves in all different directions, lines in all different directions is really going to help improve your painting. So we're going to start with little curves in the center. Okay, and you can see as I'm going out, I'm pushing that belly and kind of coming back to tip. So tip, push the belly, tip. I'm getting more water on my brush, tip, belly, tip. Tap a little bit of paint here, tip, belly, and tip. So that's what those petals are. Tip, belly, tip, over and over again. As we do all of these flowers going forward, and all the ones that I've already done, a lot of them, this stroke is what you need to know. Okay, let's talk about leaves a little bit. Let's talk about how we do tip, belly, tip doing leaves. So let's take a nice green here. And I like to do a 1-stroke and 2-stroke leaf. So there's several kinds of leaves you can do. There's definitely ones that aren't as like perfected shapes. But once you get the general idea of this, it's easier to then move on to doing chaotic leaves. I hope that made sense. So again, we're going to start with our tip, push through the belly, and then end up off our tip. There is a leaf. Simple, easy peasy. okay? Now a 2-stroke leaf, we're just gonna do the same thing 2 times. We're gonna do tip, push out the belly, tip, and then on the other side, start same tip, belly, and tip. That tip did not work out the greatest. But again, it's all about practice. And also, when we're doing leaves, we don't always want them to come to a perfect tip. So even if you can't get those strokes perfectly and you're not there, that doesn't mean you can't paint beautiful things, okay? So I'm gonna do the same thing, but come down this way. So again, working on these strokes in different directions, okay? And if you don't get it in 1 stroke or 2 strokes, that's fine. But a lot of things in watercolor, the less you mess with it and fuss with it, the better it's going to look. Not everything, but a lot of things in watercolor, if you can plop it down and leave it, it's going to work out better in the end. So another type of, I'm gonna say, we've been doing tip, belly, and the brush is somewhat vertical, maybe 45 degrees, but there's another stroke that I love to use, and it's pushing through the side of the brush. So we're pushing through the belly of the brush this way. Doing the side of the brush is pushing through the belly of the brush this way, okay? I'm like, keep switching up my greens. I just love green. So if we're doing tip, belly, tip, but this way instead of this way, I'm gonna start with the tip. I'm pushing sideways and then ending up at the belly, ending back up at the tip. And there's a lot of like fun leaves you can do this way. And there's a lot of, not smooth edges that you can do this way. And you can also do some dry brushing through the side of the brush. That's one of the ways that you get dry brushing is using the side of your brush. So I'm gonna use the side coming down this way. And this is where we get into the little bit looser and more organic looking leaves. So we just kind of, it's the same stroke, but a different direction, okay? I'm still starting small and getting bigger and then ending small again. So we have tip, belly, tip this way. And then we have going this way. So my brush is in the same angle. One, I went this way. One, I'm gonna go, whoops, this way, okay? My hand slipped, okay? I hope this is making sense. I hope this is helping. So again, I'm gonna demonstrate that one more time. We have tip, belly, tip coming this direction, and then holding it in the same direction, holding it the same way, but going a different direction. We're gonna do tip, belly, tip, pushing it out that way, okay? And then you get into different brushes and what the different brushes do. So different shapes will produce different things. If you want to see, I actually have a video on doing leaves with different brushes. I will link that down below. If you haven't watched it yet, it would be a good one to follow up with after this video. But if you have any specific questions about brush strokes, about specific brushes, let me know what you want to see in a video and I will gladly talk about it. So let's do a flower with the same principle in mind, okay? So we're gonna do tip, belly, tip, and we're gonna do it forward ways and sideways ways. Okay, I'm gonna show you the difference. All right, so I'm going in the direction of the brush and we're gonna do some petals. So I'm just pushing that belly out, and these are just very quick, very simple, basic rounded petals, okay? Not anything complicated. Now, doing the same thing, but with the side of the brush. So instead of going forward, I'm gonna go sideways. So we're just using the side of the brush. This specific color takes more to reactivate. Like this, and using the side of the brush, you can typically get a little bit more loose, organic shapes, not quite as placed. I was planning on this video to be super quick and me not take much time, but when I start talking, man, when I get passionate about brush and colors and shapes and, okay, here we go. Let me get a color that shows up a little bit better. Which one reactivates super well? Oh, I like this color. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna do the same thing that I just did. We're gonna do petal, going forward with the brush, okay? And again, when we're doing flowers in tutorials, just remember we're starting with a little bit pressure and pushing through more pressure. So in future videos, if I say tip, belly, tip, this is what I am talking about, okay? So we've got some petals, right? Such a pretty color. Okay, now using the same thing, but we're going on the side of the brush, you can get a slightly different effect. And just play with your brushes, play with using different sides and different strokes, and see what feels natural and organic to you. Okay? All right, so I'm just gonna finish these off and then we're gonna finish up this video. I'm just gonna place some little yellow in the center and then we're gonna do some leaves to finish this off. What color should we do? I'm gonna take some Prussian green. All right, so I'm gonna start here with the tip of the brush. I'm gonna push through that belly. We need some more water. And push through that belly, okay? And I'm gonna leave it a little jagged. I want a little bit of organicness in here, okay? So you don't always have to have perfect shaped leaves. It really depends on the style that you're going for and you wanna paint. All right, so I'm trying to do this where you can see. Okay, so we're gonna start with the tip of our brush and then I'm gonna push out the side and go down. And then we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna start with the tip, push through this way. Now let's get a little bit on this side. 2 strokes, just click quick. And then maybe right here too. Just quickly right there. All right, so there is that. I hope that this was a little bit helpful in giving you some things to practice to help make painting florals a little bit easier for you in the future. This is also a great way to try out, test out new brushes, new paints, and all of that. So again, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. If you have any tips for other painters, please leave those as well. We all want to learn from each other here. And again, I am by no means the most seasoned professional artist, but I just want to share the knowledge that I do have and continue to grow alongside you. But that is it for this one. If you did enjoy this, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already and you want to see our future videos, hit that subscribe button down below and I will see you guys next time. Bye. I like to paint. And I want to paint. I want to paint more. I need to go edit though. Okay, I'll stop.